Okay,
Ready to go.
live now.
All right, welcome everybody to the Node CTC meeting for March 8th. Can't believe it's already March 8th. We should have a pretty light agenda today. We don't have a lot of folks on the call. Let's go ahead and do a stand up first. Let's see, based on who's on the list here. I think Bradley, you are first.
So I'm working on porting and fixing the loader implementation into C++ so people can't muck with it, and working with some people on exact hooks that need to be available to JavaScript. That's it. Next up is Ben.
Same as always, nothing of note. I think Kita's next.
Some buffer related things in the ecosystem, and I was trying to think about how the buffer issue should be fixed in the next major. So next is Colin.
Colin is
So
not
next
here.
is Ivan.
Yeah, for me, just been cutting 7.7.2 small release. Next is Jeremiah, or next is Franziska. Sorry.
I was doing some outreach mentoring. It was the final week, and there's a PR coming with several fixes for the VM module. Next is Jeremiah.
Just a question. Like how do you feel progress was made on that? Because I haven't been up to speed exactly what your mentee has all been doing. Could you give a brief overview of some different VM things that were fixed or done or learned on her
There
end?
was several problems in the VM module. It's the sandbox behavior that's used a lot in Jest and JSDOM, and we always had function because we weren't able to intercept things like define property. And she was changing, or still is changing, the implementation with a newer V8 API so that we can intercept all of the definitions and setters and gathers and get rid of this copy properties hack.
Okay, sounds good. Awesome. As for myself, nothing particularly notable. James is next.
Last week we had the VM Summit. We have also been busy landing backports for V6 and V4. Also working on the copyright PR. I'll have status up on that, but that got delayed just a little bit because of the VM Summit and the landing backports. Next would be Josh.
Yeah, so was at the VM Summit last week. Been reviewing an API and just some general diag stuff. Next is Michael Dawson.
Right, so I was at the VM Summit as well. Just ongoing work with the NAPI team. Set up and participated in the build work group meeting, and then just the standard keeping up to date on issues and commenting and so forth. Next is, I think, Brian White.
Brian
Unless
here.
He filled in advance, so maybe it's Ali.
All right, I was at the VM Summit last week. Along with Matthew Loring, I did a presentation on FFI. Apart from that, not much else to report. And looking at who's next and who's around, I don't know if Rod is around.
Rod is not here.
Really unlikely.
Be hopefully out of sleep right now.
Is anybody else around who's not covered yet?
I think that's everybody. Okay. We have a pretty light agenda. We can talk about last meeting. We talked about the async loader for module stuff. We talked about Bradley's sketchy as heck loader implementation that we could discussed some, but that's still a major work in progress. We talked about updating the copyright, which we'll be talking about again. This week we only have 1, 2, 3, 4 items on the agenda. It should go pretty quick. Hopefully, we won't take up the whole hour. And I know some folks have to leave at 8:30. So let's get into the first item. First one is governance issue 11488. Nominating Franziska to the CTC. We have lots of votes. We just need to finalize it. We definitely have more than enough to cover the requirement. So the final step is, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Franziska, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay.
Now a voting member. Very, very happy to have you here. Cool. So we can close that issue out. Let's see. Next one is issue 9726, symbol key props visible in inspection by default. Rich put this on the agenda. This is one that I know I've had an objection to. I believe there's only one other person that's got an objection to this at this point. Since I have objected to this, but I've pulled back on that. Does someone want to speak to this that supports this and kind of discuss why we'd want to do this? Ben, you had marked on there that you think that this is a good idea. Did we lose Ben? Do we still have Ben? Where is that? Oh, looks like we might have lost him. Okay, so the basic idea here is to make things that, make symbol keys, which currently are hidden by default when we do util inspect, to make those public when we do util inspect.
By default, right?
By default. It looks like the only person still strongly against it is Kurchetkin.
So
how do we plan to represent the key value? Since it's a symbol, will we make that clear? That it's not a regular property?
I imagine so. You probably just print out that it's like symbol parentheses with whatever value is passed into symbol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it uses the regular toString on there.
So is most people's objections or concerns about this relating to console log and not actually util.inspect?
For me, yeah. I would rather that on console log. I'd rather than be hidden.
Now, is that just because browsers hide it, or do you think we should actually hide it regardless of what browsers do?
I think symbols are a decent way of having hidden state without it making, without going down the rabbit hole of actual private members. That's just more of a personal style preference for me. I'm not going to lay down on the road and say I don't want this.
Right.
Just I'm not quite sure what
Can you?
I'm not sure what his objection is.
Can you see symbol properties if you're like using inspect or an actual debugger? Because I'm trying to think like when you'd want to see these, and one would probably be okay, not necessarily looking for things, but if you're like, trying to debug why maybe, I don't know, a future HTTP API is working a certain way, and there's a bunch of things hidden by symbols, and you're wondering, okay, what's necessarily the state in this certain situation? Like most of us console log for debugging. Let's be real. Wouldn't you want to see that? Like, again, I don't know if you would see that in debugger anyways. And
Doing a quick check
those
real quick
symbols
to
are
see it.
still inaccessible, I think, unless you maybe use like weird reflect API stuff to try to get them out.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at what
Because
Chrome
you can't
does.
just reconstruct the symbol with the value, right? Because it's still unique.
Yeah.
Unless it's a global.
Yeah, Chrome exposes it. I think Firefox does too. When you do console log an object with a symbol, you see the symbol and the value. Like I said, I'm not gonna. It's more of a personal preference thing for me, so it's nothing that I'm gonna send it away. And I think you're right. Most people, when they do the console log, are gonna want to see that state. I would just like to make sure that we still have a way of turning it off or making those. Like I think the proposal is to skip ones that are non-enumerable. So if I really wanted to hide it, I would just make it non-enumerable. Which I think is fine. By the way, Ben says he's having a connection problem. It keeps getting dropped. Well, let me ask this. Besides myself, does anyone have any objections to this in 726 exposing symbol props by default?
As a patch release or as a minor?
Is a Semver major. The PR is currently marked as a Semver major. Anna was the one that marked it that way.
Yeah, I'm +1 for it as long as it's in a major version.
Okay. Now, V. Kurchatkin has a objection. He's -1 it several times, so we need to decide if we're going to move forward despite that objection or try to convince him. He says he's strongly opposed to it. So,
Has he said why? Useful to know why in detail.
Let's see. He said behavior is intentional for the sake of consistency, -1. But browsers seem to expose it, so I'm not sure. I'm looking. More properties are no more visible than non-enumerable string properties. That's not exactly true.
Oh yeah, -1. The behavior is intentional. This for the sake of consistency, and that would be for non-enumerable string properties. Are we sure browsers show them then? Because that'd be weird.
I just checked. I just checked. Chrome definitely shows it.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably a good idea, but.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a point, but personally, like, okay, just on like a personal level, I've never really seen the point of non-enumerable properties to begin with. Maybe someone wants to enlighten me on that. I don't know.
It's like I said, for me, it's just a matter of when you want to have private state without, without having, not going down that rabbit hole, actually making the language have to have it.
So just a heads up, enumerable properties generally are considered to be the way to go for class methods and things that are not associated directly with an object itself. So for in historically will skip all the DOM methods because they're non-enumerable, but they will show if you add any custom properties to a DOM object. So that's generally what they're considered used for.
I just verified that Firefox hides the symbol properties by default while Chrome shows them. And I'm checking what Edge does.
Yeah, I didn't see anything about this in the console spec either, because it doesn't really define that. Yeah. can you set? I mean, are symbol properties enumerable by default? Because then you could probably just use object.define property to properly hide a symbol value if you really wanted to, and that would be consistent, I think. I mean, that means not printing them all if they're not enumerable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Franziska, do you know if symbol properties are enumerable by default?
No, I don't know.
Let me look up here and see, get the property description.
So they follow the same rules as any other property, but they're not going to show up in things that use strings. So they're enumerable by default unless you use define property.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at that right now. Okay. Yeah, they're not enumerable. So Edge hides them by default. Firefox hides them by default.
No, they
Chrome
are enumerable under the way that most people assign them.
Yeah, I'm just saying that in the console log, Edge does not show them. Firefox does not show them. Chrome does show them. So again, it goes back. Do we want to push forward despite his objection, or do we want to try to convince him and not move forward unless we do?
Well, I'm gonna reply to him about the enumerable, unenumerable thing because I think that's worth looking into then. Because it does make sense to keep some consistency there. But I think when symbols are enumerable, there's not really a strong reason for us not to show them for the sake of helping people. Since again, many people do use these things for stuff like debugging.
Okay. So let's take it back to the conversation back to GitHub then, see if we can convince him, and if we cannot, then we can bring it back for a vote. Sound good? Okay. Right, so the next issue is 174, updating the copyright. This one's on me. Basically, same status where we were last week. I need to update the PR and then get it landed. I was going to do that last week, but the VM Summit and the need to help Miles out with backporting stuff to 4 and 6 precedents. So same status on that, and no update yet on the new copyright. We still have not heard anything from the foundation or the legal committee, and I will be following up on that within the next week or two to just make sure that the conversation is progressing. Any questions or concerns about the copyright stuff at this point? Okay, moving on, Node EPS issue 51, web compatible file extension index searching. Bradley, this is yours.
So Dominic and some of the Polymer devs are concerned about path searching. So that means file extension, searching in directories for index or package.json when you give import a relative or absolute path. So when we were discussing ESM loader, I was a bit careful to always ensure that our behavior only diverges in the case where a browser would produce an error normally. So the WhatWG spec is compatible in my mind from that perspective. However, there requesting we don't do path searching on relative or absolute path names. We only do it when you're importing between packages. It's more requests so that they can move all the errors to after resolution. So the problem for them is if we do it on relative or absolute path names, that means we actually would be saying for the browsers, if this will give you a 404, then you need to do path searching, which they don't have any network access in the resolution algorithm, and they don't really want to add hooks for that. So this is just something to talk about and see how people feel about it. I'm not strong one way or the other. So, yeah.
Is there a better example of when exactly this comes into play? Because I'm not sure I fully understood what you were talking about when with the what sort of require path you need to give it where this will happen.
Sure. So if I do require ./lib right now, it'll look for lib.js. It'll look for lib/index.js and so on. They're requesting that we only do that kind of searching when you do it between packages. So ./lib would only look at ./lib. It would never add file extensions. It would never look for indexes or a package. They only want the searching to be when you do a package. So if I require lodash/chunk, so no leading slash, no leading dot, then we would do path searching is their request. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's a package? So they want to make like a Python module where referring to stuff will imply referring to like sub modules and sub functions.
Well, no, we don't have a good term for package in core, but we do kind of imply it by the use of package.json and node modules lookup paths. So when I'm talking about package, I'm talking about a directory with a package.json that is looked up using a bare specifier. That means one that starts generally with an alphanumeric or some character that is not a leading dot or leading slash. So it's the node modules lookup.
I really don't want to change the resolution of things even more than we already will be in terms of existing users.
Like I said, I'm somewhat neutral on this, so.
Somewhat neutral?
There are benefits and cons both ways. I have opinions, but no strong ones.
I have to say I'm probably in the same boat.
I mean, I feel like kind of, so there's like sort of a big thing to doing like it's especially into other packages. So if you want to require, say, lodash/defaults or something, then in Lodash's directory, so long as like they can kind of they have some room to like play around with that. It could be defaults.js. It could be defaults in a folder with some other stuff to help them make it more modular. Now I'm understanding that still works though. Is that correct?
yes, they're fine with that behavior. Begrudging, but fine.
I mean, I think it's probably kind of nice and consistent that you could use the same thing locally. And I feel like we've kind of been telling people in various ways to kind of do that so that you have as like a best practice for years anyways. What
Well,
exactly does this break on what Polymer's end?
there's a pretty long thread on Twitter about this where they feel that by having this search behavior, the web platform will be treated as a second-class citizen in NPM because people will rely on this searching behavior for local paths. And yeah, the thread on Twitter would be where to read all of that. I could dig it up sometime, but it's long, really long. So on the other side of things, the argument here is somewhat that people don't really control other packages. So if I'm importing Lodash, generally I don't control the level of abstraction that Lodash has. And so path searching seems okay there. But for relative or absolute things, I should have control over the path. And so refactoring should be somewhat expected. I'm not sure I entirely agree with the argument, but it is a sane argument that you do control your own file paths within your packages.
That's like a really big change.
Yes. There's also a really big change once you start using URLs, which we already jumped ship on.
Why would this have been vastly easier to decide if we didn't use URLs? Would we have not even
No,
used
but
URLs? I don't think so.
we could not use URLs. It would make things very odd between browsers and Node. But the attempt to keep everything within a compatible set of error conditions means how we handle URLs matches browsers more than it matches require. Unless you're doing something really strange, you shouldn't see any compatibility problems. But there are cases where there are definitely visible changes. If you were doing things with file names that had special URL characters in them, for example, it'll be visible. But it sounds like there isn't really any strong will to do this change. So I'm going to leave the issue open and just tell Dominic and them that they can reply there and listen to this recording if they want. So, sound good?
Yep, sounds good. Um, Do we want to have any more update on module implementation, or rather, is it just pretty much everyone needs to go, all the CTC members need to go take a look at the implementation?
You can take that look at an implementation. I wrote that one in JavaScript mostly as a proof, and to be able to write some tests. I'm basically porting all of that into C++, so you won't be able to monkey patch it as you currently can. So, yeah.
On that note, I am making progress on the URL implementation for the native API for it. Expect something there probably by Wednesday.
Sounds good, but that's it for me.
Okay, anything else to discuss? We can get into Q&A next.
Yeah, I put in, well, I guess you could consider it Q&A, but I wanted to ask the CTC if we're planning on landing V8 5.7 or 5.8 in Node 8.
So it's going to depend on the timing. I'm going to be cutting the 8 branch on Monday to start the process of the betas and the release candidate. I think the goal is to get 5.7 in, but I think that's still a work in progress. And I think I wish Targus was here to kind of talk about where that was at, but we can touch bases on that next week. It's not first RC on Monday. It'll be the first beta on Monday. I'm looking at the notes here. I won't do the RCs. I won't start RCs until the first week of April. So the goal would be for all December majors to be done before that first RC is cut.
Sorry, when is that going to be?
I'm going to cut the first release candidate the first week of April.
Okay.
And what I can do is try and do it later in that week. Let me see here. What's the calendar? Well, I'm going to be traveling April 5th, so I'm going to try to do it by April 4th. I'll cut the first RC.
So as for the schedule from the V8 side, my expectation is that V8 5.7 should be stable soon. So I think 5.7 should definitely be on track to be in Node 8. The question really comes around V8 5.8, which has some API changes, more specifically the old debug JSON protocol. So that's no longer there in 5.8. So and as for the schedule is.
Do you have the schedule in front of you, Ali, or should I say it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I think the last week of April was when 5.8 was supposed to go stable. So from a schedule point of view, yeah. So from a schedule point of view, while it's possible for 5.8 to get into Node 8, I think it's going to be important for the CTC to actually make a decision on which one we're going to pick, because the lack of the JSON debugging protocol will mean that we will have to start doing some work now if we want to be able to ship 5.8, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for us to ship 5.8 because it will necessarily require us to remove the old debug support from Node 8.
Yeah, that does also put us in a bit of a pickle later if we were to. So in, I think both 6 and 7 we did in, or maybe just in 4 and 6 we did in-stream V8 bumps, but it sounds like that would not be possible if we went 5.7, or at least the difference would be very large. I don't know if it'd be possible the other way around either. So, 5.8 to 5.9, no idea.
So the question really becomes, so should it have the old debug protocol or not, right? So if you want to do a in-stream somewhere major or ABI compatible bump, then we'll have to make sure that we can put that back in when we bring in 5.8. So I think that's really fundamentally the question, whether or not we do a ABI compatible bump, and whether the feasibility, if it depends on what node it intends to have from an API perspective.
Right.
So we just deprecated the old debug stuff a couple weeks ago. We're not really giving everyone that much time. I know the VS team here has actually asked me about that. Like they depend on the old one, and I'm sure there's other stuff out there. Node Inspector is an example, although of course you could use Chrome DevTools now. So it kind of seems like that, for that stability. I mean, if we're still only giving a version in a few weeks, a couple months for that deprecation. So yeah, it kind of sticks us, with 5.7, but maybe we have to do that.
So I think the summary answer is we're really going to try to get at least 5.7. I'm going to say that's probably the minimum we're going to commit to. Does that seem reasonable?
I kind of want to know if we're going to try for 5.8 because, yeah, people want to plan the debug stuff. So if that's going to go away in the 8.0, then that's important to know.
Is there anything coming in 5.8 that someone would particularly want?
Actually, 5.8 has very little because the VA team has been focused on shipping Ignition and Turbofan in 5.9. So I think there was a very short runway for 5.8. So anything major in it. Francisca might know a bit more.
Oh, so okay, so that kind of gives us a little bit more perspective though, because if you're planning on shipping Ignition in 5.9, I'm not sure if we'd want that immediately in an LTS stream anyways.
Right.
Agree.
I would say go 5.7 then.
What's your concern about Ignition?
It's about Ignition going into the LTS stream for 8, since it is such a significant difference on the optimization. We may not want to have it be what we take into LTS until
Or
it's proven out
rather,
a little
the
bit more.
first stable version.
Yeah. Now, as we get it along in 8 and closer to October, if 5.9 just looks like solid and we're not seeing any issues and there's no ABI breaks or anything like that, then we may look at it and say, hey, let's go ahead and get it into LTS. But just, I don't think we want to overcommit until we get a little more hands-on with it.
So it's going to be hard. I think that even when 8 goes LTS, if we switch from 5.7 to 5.9, and then we either have to backport the debug protocol if we want to truly stay Semver compliant.
Well, we have to. I mean, it's not if we'll have to if we go out with 5.7 then out of the gate.
Oh, okay. So Ali, you're saying if we went with 5.8 at the beginning, we would do it with the. Oh no, I see. If we would start with 5.8, then that wouldn't be relevant. So forget that. Yeah. If we started with 5.7, we would have to backport at some point.
Yeah, it's not quite a backport. It's basically undoing the change in. So if we start with 5.7 and then later want to go to 5.8 or 5.9, then we'll have to put back the old JSON debug protocol and support it ourselves.
Okay. All right. So, what are the dates for 5.8 for in terms of it going stable?
I think it's last week of April.
I think Francisca said the 24th or 25th or something.
5.8 is the week of April 25th. Somebody also sent a link to the calendar.
Yeah, but these are tentative dates, so they can shift. So so take that with a grain of salt.
All right. So my only challenge there is like I'm not too comfortable tying the release to something that's not going to be stable until end of April. We need, because that's the week we need to actually cut the 8.0 release. That would mean that there would be no chance of getting it into the getting the stable in the release candidates. We'll be doing release candidates with a beta.
Well, in the past, I mean, that hasn't necessarily been a problem. Not that I think we should go with 5.8. I think we should go with 5.7 for Node 8. That's the EPI we support. But in the past, like, I mean, we brought in V8 stable, or we had beta a couple of weeks early in order to sort of align the timeline.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think we did that with 7 also. I said, I mean, we have done it. It's not a strong objection. I would just prefer not. It doesn't make me too comfortable. If we are reasonably guaranteed that it will come, that it won't slip, then okay, we can do the 5.8 in the release candidates. But if there's any chance that it's going to slip, I just would prefer not.
At this point, there's no guarantee that it's not going to slip, right? So at this point, it's 5.7 hasn't shipped yet, so there's no clear timeline for when 5.8 will slip. Like, we have an estimate, okay, but that's the best.
Okay. So the best answer we have at this point is 5.7 for we're reasonably sure, but we're really going to try to push for 8. Yeah.
I'll just voice again that I kind of am opposed to start. I mean, I'm not CTC, but I'm kind of opposed to starting with 5.8 because of that really short deprecation window that we gave for the debug protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Yep.
That would mean that 5.8 can get into any minor release in the branch. Is that correct?
Well, with 5.8, we would have, from what I understand, I mean, we could put it into a minor, but then we'd have to backport the debugging stuff to it. Otherwise, it would be a December major change going to 5.8. We would have to wait till 9 for Node 9 in October. So, okay.
So just to finalize, so the plan of record, James, is we're planning to include 5.7, and we're going to make every to include 5.8.
We're going to make an effort to include 5.8, but definitely not decided yet.
So, but is that the CTC's position, or is that, James, your position?
That's my position. I mean, I don't think we'd have to have more CTC members here to be able to come up with a group decision. What I will say is, as the one that's actually going to be cutting the release candidates, makes me really nervous pushing for 5.8.
So I think since he's cutting the release, I mean, if we just do nothing by default, we're going to default to his decision. So.
Okay. As updates come with 5.8, if y'all can just kind of proactively reach out and let me know, so I'm aware of what the schedule and what the issues are, so I can plan ahead with regards to the release candidates themselves. Okay. All right, so looking at the time, we're at the top of the hour. Are there any other questions? I'm not in front of the list, so I can't see. Jeremiah, were there any questions posted to the IRC or comment list or Twitter?
Should we call another one on sorry, another one to mention regarding 8 is the NAPI stuff that the CTC should probably review, because I think they're gonna submit a PR in the next week or 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
My understanding was they were gunning for Node 10.
No, that's for the FFI stuff. That's the hope. So based on the meeting last week, the plan is to get a PR opened within the next week or 2 to get the current state of NAPI in is experimental, not behind a config flag, but behind a runtime flag. And this would be to get it out in the hands of native module developers so they can actually start playing with it, but as experimental and with a process warning emitted when you actually go to use it to say, hey, don't do this in production. So they've got that to a state, the NAPI stuff to a state where it's functional. It's nowhere near complete, but it can be used. So. The FFI stuff, Ali, you can speak to this better, but that is still a significant work in progress. The hope at the talk, at the meeting last week was that we would have something by Node 10 timeframe, but it's not. There's absolutely no scheduled target date for it. It's just a work in progress.
Yeah, we haven't built it yet. So the hope is or we haven't built it fully yet. The hope is we can get it done in time for Node 10. But until it gets done, that's the target.
The folks that are working on the NAPI work, like I said, their goal is to have a PR within the next week, 2 weeks. Just ask that everyone take a look at that and get the comments in. I mean, with the understanding that it would be experimental and changes are expected. That's why they want to get it in, so they can start the feedback loop from people actually using it. So it certainly won't be perfect going out the gate. The really good thing is that the changes there are super minor. The actual changes to core itself are really quite minimal and introduce no breaking changes to existing code. So everything there that is used is all opt-in. So there should be no impact to existing users by putting it in as experimental. Do we have any other questions on the any of the channels, Jeremiah?
I haven't seen any. I did ask a few minutes ago now for questions in the live chat. However, the stream started with stream chat off for some reason. I'm not sure who toggled that. So if anyone asked something earlier than that, they wouldn't have been able to, fortunately.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like there's any questions, so.
Okay. Okay, then we'll go ahead and wrap up the public portion of this. Thanks everyone who's listening, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
Yep. Thanks.